Welcome back to On Texas Football. Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream, the Wednesday night mess around, as I like to call it. I'm Jeff House. CJ Vogel is right there. Rod Babers, hopefully, fingers crossed, joining us at some point here in the show. But if not, it's okay. Rod B had a previous engagement lined up tonight, so all good is there. All is good there. Taking your questions all the way. We'll go till the top of the hour, maybe a little bit after. Super chats are going to jump to the front of the line, so get those questions lined up. CJ and I will do our best to answer them. CJ, 24 days away from kickoff as of today. Favorite number 24 ever for the Longhorns? Your favorite number 24?
Jonathan Brooks, running with it. A little Doak Walker action.
Yeah, I'll die on the hill that Texas wins the national championship in 2023 if Jonathan Brooks doesn't get hurt. I will die on the hill. Michigan had a really good team, but I would have taken the Texas D-line over that Michigan O-line and Jonathan Brooks in that run game. That's my one issue, if you will, CJ, with the 2023 season. We never got to see that offense and all of those tools. We never got to see it peak. Because right when Jonathan Brooks was doing his thing, Quinn got hurt. Quinn comes back, Brooks gets hurt. So I don't know. I feel like that offense at its peak, as good as Michigan was defensively, I don't think they'd have been able to stop Texas.
Yeah, I agree. It's unfortunate too, looking at the way that Texas did lose that game. Right, pair of fumbles, and what was Jonathan Brooks really solid at? Ball security. So that's a tough one, and it's one that we'll never truly get the answers for. But yeah, Jonathan Brooks, really, really solid. The epitome of waiting your turn and trusting your development and trusting the coaches to put you in a spot to be successful for when you are on the field. And I'm sure that the Texas staff still uses him as the example to say, hey, when it's your turn, take advantage of your opportunity, and bang, you're in the NFL based off of your development behind the scenes.
I'll go with another JB just as a shout out, Joe Bergeron. I like when they took him out of North Mesquite back in 2011. There looked like a time, CJ, where that Joe Bergeron arc might have had him heading to the NFL. And then in that 2013 season, he had some ball security problems. Malcolm Brown started getting touches again. And man, we never really saw Joe Bergeron again after that. So 24 might be, CB had it earlier. Tom Landry's in there, Greg Brown. I was Joe Bergeron. We mentioned Jonathan Brooks. Special shout out, my high school defensive coordinator and English teacher, Reagan Willman, walked on at Texas for 3 years from 94 to 96. Because of the roster imposter, Ron McKelvey, Coach Willman is actually listed as the only official number 24 Texas had in 1994 and 1995. So, shout out Coach Willman. I don't know if he's listening tonight or tuning in, but shout out to him for everything he did for me and everything he did for a lot of people. We'll go ahead and get right to your questions. Texas had a day off today. They'll be back on the practice field tomorrow morning. Player availability tomorrow at 11 a.m. Again, Super Chat's going to jump to the front of the line. CJ, I'll let you take this one from Touchdown Texas. It says, hey, guys, how's Christian Clark coming along? Can he be RB2 if Baxter isn't fully healthy? CJ, I don't want to, especially before the first scrimmage, I don't want to get way out over my skis, but he might be RB. If you take CJ Baxter out of the mix, Christian Clark might be RB2 going into the opener.
Yeah, he might be there already, and I think that's a great positive. I think he has a great skill set of a guy who can make plays out of the backfield. Obviously, his hands were a big plus out of high school, Jeff, but you need that in-between one-cut-and-go ability in between the tackles, and I believe he has just that now to complement a Trey Wisner, who's about 195, 200 pounds, right in that range. Clark pushing about 210, and I think that's a very healthy 210, very sturdy in the lower body. Should be able to fall forward for those tough yardages. I know we talk about Jared Gibson being one of those guys that's in short yardage situations, but look, Daniel Art bringing it up. OTF was comparing Christian Clark to Bijan out of high school. The play style is similar, right? I'll say that. I think Bijan as an athlete, obviously a little bit superior. But the play style is very similar. Makes you miss in those tight settings, right? Makes you miss on those one cuts. And the acceleration out of the hole, Jeff, it's there. He's looked great since the spring when he returned from his Achilles injury. I think he's right there as your second running back in this group. And should CJ Baxter be limited, which I am expecting to begin the year, I would think Baxter is that number 2 guy behind a Wisner, ahead of a Jarrett Gibson, and we'll see how that role continues to go. But look, I think he's a really talented running back and someone that, when you look at what Texas needs out of its running back position this year, he fits that mold.
I was thinking about this in relation to CJ Baxter. Let's say, look, I hope he's 100% for the opener. Okay. Let's assume he's not. If you're Sark, do you even mess with, like, let's say he's like 90%? Do you have like packages for him where it's like, all right, short yardage, goal line? Do you put him out there in those packages knowing you might be a little more predictable if he's out there, but at the same time, he is your most I still think he's your most talented running back, all things equal. What do you put your Sark hat on, CJ? What do you do?
Predictability was really something tough that I thought Texas did an all right job in 2024. Because with Jarrett Gibson, I know he didn't play as many snaps as a Blue or a Wisner, but it felt very clear what Texas wanted to do with him on the field, right? And he wasn't a great pass protector, and he wasn't a big threat in the passing game. So when he was on the field, Jeff, what was happening, right? There was a lot of powers, a lot of downhills, just give the ball to him, give him a breather, especially on those 3rd and 4th and 1s, right? You saw him lined up as a fullback in many instances, and it was just basically get the ball, get your 3 feet, and then, hey, we'll live to see another down. That's where Texas really struggled, especially with the Jaden Blue, who wasn't that guy. So when they were on the field together, it was okay, hone in on one, linebacker hone in on the other, and know which one is going to be your threat in the passing game. It was very clearly Blue in those situations. So Clark's going to be interesting because I think he provides a little bit more of that balance than even a Trey Wisner, who I think still can be a pretty solid weapon in that passing game. Not as much as we saw a year ago, but Clark, to me, brings the best of both worlds there, where Gibson still is I don't want to call him a one-trick pony because he's not, but he certainly lends to be that guy where you know what you're going to get more times than not with him on the field as that guy in the backfield, Jeff. And that's going to be the really interesting spot because, too, you could even throw a Ryan Wingo into the backfield as we saw a year ago as well, and there's another pass receiving threat as well. It's going to be interesting because I don't know what that starting rotation will look like against Ohio State. Sark mentioned it yesterday. Still about 23 practices to go before they truly start to finalize what those rotations look like, what those overall substitutions look like. But one thing I know is that Texas has a lot of options at that running back position. It's all going to be about how they end up utilizing those substitutions to get away from that predictability.
And I think that leads us into our first super chat of the night from Scott Sturgeon. Any updates on red zone offense? I think we'll get some coming out of this first scrimmage, but we heard Sark talk about this a little bit, CJ, on Monday, or I'm sorry, yesterday, in reference to Jack injuries and Emmett Mosley. They needed both those guys because they needed a veteran presence at tight end. I think they just needed another receiver, especially if that receiver was a proven commodity, again, just to get some more experience. But I think both those guys could help out in the red zone. And I think Mosley and DeAndre Moore, how I would use those guys. Again, they're not only either. And, Mosley did have, I think, 8 contested catches last year. The only other freshman in the country that had more was Jeremiah Smith. That's according to Pro Football Focus. But I'm not thinking so much like Matthew Golden where you're doing like the back shoulder stuff or the fade, which, again, I'm a big proponent of firing the red zone fade right into the sun. Like I could never see it again in a football game and be 100% fine. But I'm thinking, like, especially with Arch's legs, I think the RPO based stuff in the red zone could be infinitely more deadly for Texas this year, especially because, like, if you got that hard run action and Arch can pull up and you're running like a glance to Emmett Mosley, a bigger, thicker bodied guy that understands, like, hey, you can put it in a window. He's going to make a tough catch, knowing that safety's going to be barreling down on him. He's willing to sacrifice his body. I think DeAndre Moore's got a little bit of that too. I actually think, for me, it all comes back to Arch's legs when you talk about the red zone, because for all the good things Quinn did, that's just a dimension they just didn't have with Quinn Ewers at quarterback.
It was completely absent, which is odd because we even saw a few times where there were rushing touchdowns from Quinn in the red zone, right? You look at the big run against Baylor. He had a nice run right outside the red zone against Kansas at home a few years ago. Ran a touchdown in against Oklahoma on the red zone, on the goal line, excuse me. But for Arch, I think it's going to be a different animal. And I think that's the biggest element that you'll see added to this offense in 25 is, hey, you got a quarterback that can move and move very well. How can you implement that into your offense to add a wrinkle that defenses just can't keep up with in those tight areas? And again, that's where Texas struggled a lot. And again, I don't want to get into the offensive line yet, Jeff, but that conversation is coming. Are you sure you're going to have an offensive line that's going to displace defensive linemen as often as you'd like? That's the big question because it's an unknown, right? It's a brand new unit. That week one test will tell you just about everything you need to know early on in the year. But the one thing you do know, you have a quarterback that can move. Yeah. Now, will you see PA waggles? Will you see the pocket move out? I thought that was when Quinn was at his best a year ago. Some of those rollouts, get the ball to Matthew Golden on a short corner, come back to the pylon. Probably didn't see that enough with Xavier Worthy, at times using some of those whip routes or comebacks and whatnot. But that's what I wanted to see more of a year ago. We didn't see it enough. Now with Arch, is it just the run? Is it Jack injuries? Is it a Matthew Gold Emmett Mosley? Because those big bodies, hey, that's going to help box out defensive backs and play the ball much better than what Texas has had from a positional approach over the last couple of years.
We'll get to some of the questions here in just a second, but I think this comment by Bobby Petronic, I think this is really worth pointing out. The difference maker in the red zone will be whether or not Arch can process the compressed field better than Quinn because we didn't let QE try to decipher the scrum. Man, there were times where, especially late in the year, I think once the ankle injury against Kentucky really kind of, took hold of Quinn, it really seemed CJ to be boom or bust in the red zone for Tech. Like the A&M game to me encapsulates my red zone frustrations with that team last year, where you had Quinn fit a ball into a window that, quite frankly, he had no business trying to fit it into that window, and Jaden Blue made a heck of a catch in the back of the end zone. And then there was the Will Lee pick six where I just don't know what he was looking at. Don't know. I mean, only Quinn can answer that, and maybe Sark could, but it's just those frustrations. And that's the good thing about the RPO. The RPO is supposed to take some of that away. It's supposed to clear up the picture a little bit. But the problem is, especially in the red zone, if the quarterback's not a run threat, then you're less playing the run option, and it's more of a PPO. It's a pass option for the defense. They're not even going to play the run because, especially in this league, you've probably got linebackers that are athletic enough that if your quarterback does pull it down, they're going to be able to get to the point, and they may not stop it for no gain, but at least maybe if you're at the part of the field, it probably won't score.
Yeah, the other part of this is, look, one of those quarterbacks was able to sneak a football on those 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 situations a year ago. The other was not. And, we heard about it from Sark, teaching Arch how to sneak a football. And it might sound like a crazy concept, but there are techniques to getting under center and utilizing that QB sneak. And I think that's going to be a piece of this Texas offense as well, something that, again, we haven't seen with Quinn Ewers. But yeah, the point's there. For Quinn, it was a lot of RPOs, get the ball where it needs to go. One read looks, if it's not there, throw it away because the scramble wasn't there. Now, again, I go back to some of the first touchdowns that we saw Arch throw a year ago, designed rollouts, use your improvisation to create. I think back to that little flip to Silas Bolden in which Quinn's not making that play. Let's be honest. Now, how can you replicate that and find ways to score when it's off script? And that's where I think Texas will have more success in the red zone this year as well.
That's also going to help out. I hate saying the offensive line is inexperienced because you've got some guys like I looked at it today, CJ, and I actually did this for a story over on TexasFootball.com about the offensive line. Just looking at some of the stuff Sark said yesterday post practice about the Kojo injury, and just, hey, they feel like they've got guys in the room. They're not panicked. They're, Kyle Flood's going to continue to develop guys, and it's a long season. They're going to need everybody in that room. But I started looking at snap counts. Like DJ Campbell in his career, a little over 1,800 snaps. Notice Cole Hudson's played over 1,400 snaps at this level. So you got two guys that are, in the 1,400 to 1,900 snap range. That's a lot. Cole Hudson has a full year. Granted, it was as a freshman. It was a minute ago, but he started all 13 games as a true freshman. And he's actually played in one more game than DJ Campbell has. Cole's played in 38. DJ's played in 37. But I keep going back to it. I know I sound like a broken record, but man, you go back to last year, rewatching, like, especially the SEC championship game, the Cotton Bowl loss to Ohio State. Man, I was surprised at how many high leverage situations the offense had where it wasn't DJ Campbell in the game at right guard. It was Cole Hudson. That's why, to me, DJ Campbell getting back to practice yesterday after his issue following the first day, that's huge because it's a contract year for DJ Campbell, CJ. For his NFL future, it really is now or never for him.
Yeah, it is. And again, we've talked about it. He, about 2 months ago, looked to be in the best shape of his Texas career. Now, that's great. But can you have the mental aspect of that goes along with being physically ready to roll? And for DJ, he's always been a great athlete. And for Cole Hudson, look, he's always been a guy that, when on the field, has contributed in some degree, whether it be at left guard, right guard. He hasn't played center just yet for Texas, but that's where he'll be this fall. The big thing is, again, both guys, and add NATO into the conversation, Jeff, all three will have been in the system for 4 years by the time that Texas kicks off against Ohio State. That should mean something. Does that equate to a plus offensive line? It doesn't, but it should mean that you're further along mentally, and let's be honest, physically, having been with Torrey Becton for 4 years now. So you should have that leg up than what you would expect three brand new starters on the offensive line should be. And again, to your point, Cole started, about 15 career games, played in 38. Same situation for DJ Campbell, 2 years starting. So there's plenty of experience with this system, with the calls, with the diagnosis of a defense, with the ability to sit there and get out of checks, and understanding stunts and blitz and pickups and et cetera. But right now, my question is more so, do they gel enough in that running game in between the tackles? Because I do think Brandon Baker's coming off a day in which he probably had his best practice as a Longhorn on Tuesday. And I think we obviously are very high on Trevor Goosby and what he will be able to do filling the shoes of Kelvin Banks. So you're going to have a talented bunch, but do they gel quickly enough to go into Columbus and really prove to be the dominant force on that side of the ball?
Yeah, Arch's legs, where I was going with that is Arch's legs will help the offensive line a little bit, an offensive line that needs to come together. I mean, you think of Goosby, like Goosby as a freshman, as a true freshman, only played 9 snaps, like didn't get much action at all. And Texas doesn't rotate offensive linemen a lot, except for, like the Cole Hudson, DJ Campbell dynamic the last couple of years. They've rotated. They usually don't rotate. Well, last year, Goosby played over 300 snaps. And you think about and this is like the physical gifts, like he made Bruce Feldman's freaks list, like the physical gifts with Goosby are off the charts. But I go back and look at the games where, man, he didn't really have time to think or, whatever. It was just like, hey, man, you're baptism by fire going in, 6 plays, whatever it was, into the A&M game for an injured Kelvin Banks. And then you got to start the SEC championship game against the Kirby Smart defense in Georgia. And then Cam Williams gets hurt in the first round playoff game. So now the Peach Bowl, a CFP quarterfinal, now you've got to start that game at right tackle. And the fact that he played well at both spots.
Yeah.
I feel as good as I could, CJ, about an offensive line that lost an Outland Trophy winner.
Yeah, and look, that's the position in which Nick Brooks is going to be in this year as well. And I think you're absolutely right. Where Trevor Goosby is now, that's what you expect for a guy that came in on that developmental track, right? Took him a year to get on the field. Took him a year and a half to really be in a situation in which Texas trusted him quite a bit. Now going into year 3, he's gotten his feet wet enough, and you like what you saw. You're saying, okay, the rain, taking the leash off. You're that guy now, but that wheel of depth must continue. And again, that's where Nick Brooks is. He unfortunately doesn't have that luxury of having a full year to bake as a redshirt to get his body right. Unfortunately, due to the injury of an Andre Kojo, Nick Brooks already seeing reps at right tackle as well, and that's probably going to be the guy that I ask about first, Jeff. After Saturday's scrimmage, when he's on the field, does he look like he matches up on the right side as he does to the left? Does he look like he could play either side of the ball right away with that first team? Did he get run with the first team is going to be another question, because Texas needs that offensive tackle depth. And again, it's not something that you can just very easily walk into the co-op and go grab a guy, as Sark mentioned on Tuesday. But that's just as important of any position on the field for the Longhorns. And, there's no hiding it. Losing Kojo is a significant loss for the Longhorns depth there.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the transfer portal, what's available out there to see if there is a tackle by chance. I would imagine if there's an offensive tackle in the transfer portal at this point, CJ, it's probably you're better off figuring out if like Jaden Chapman or Nick Brooks or even Jordan Coleman can play, because I don't think anybody I'm not even going to look, but if there is somebody in the portal, it's very different. Like Velton Gardner coming in as a running back, like running back's one of those positions. It's not near as nuanced as a freaking offensive tackle. So I don't know, man. Sark's not going to do it, and he pretty much crapped on the idea last night. So they got what they got. Hey, we're going to thank our first sponsor tonight. Is Flat Creek Estate Winery. If you want to take a drink every time CJ mentions that Cole Hudson played in a triple option offense in high school, why not take a drink of the most awarded wine in Texas, which is actually a product of the vineyard closest to Austin? That's right. Flat Creek Estate Winery is just minutes from town, and they won award after award for their vintage wine, the Super Texan. The Super Texan recently won the San Francisco Wine Award with a score of 98 out of 100. It was named the top red blend in the country, not in Travis County, not in the state of Texas, in the entire country. The Super Texan and other Flat Creek Estate wines are now available at Specs and HEB locations across the state. Of course, Flat Creek is also a gorgeous venue with barbecues and wine tastings every single weekend. It's perfect for a day date with your significant other. Flat Creek Estate Winery is where you need to be, and we want to thank Flat Creek for their sponsorship of On Texas Football. All right, let's get to your questions. Get them in. Super chats are going to jump to the front of the line. Start with Sean. CJ, what's more likely to happen? Arch wins the Heisman or Texas wins the Natty?
Oh, that's a heck of a question. I'll say Texas wins the national championship. And I don't mean that as a slight to Arch. I'm just leaning on that Texas defense, keeping scores low, keeping, the offense off the field in those clutch situations. I don't know. I think every Texas fan here would obviously prefer the national championship. Arch is good. I think Arch is going to be really good. But that Texas defense, I think, might be the best in the country. And I talked about that a little bit today as well on TexasFootball.com. So go give that a read. But point being, if Texas was a Final Four team the last 2 years, I think if you improve at the quarterback spot, you're now in a position, given that your defense is as good as it is, to win a national championship. I think ultimately, with the way that Sark balances out his offense, Jeff, there's going to be a quarterback somewhere else across the country that puts up just utterly ridiculous stats because that's what they have to do, not out of true necessity. And I think out of true necessity, that's not going to be the ultimate calling card for Arch this year.
It's like Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels is proving himself in the NFL to be a very capable quarterback. But he got that garbage franchise turned around finally, which, by the way, does show you too. Ownership does matter in some cases, but I digress. Jaden Daniels had to put up the numbers he did, to your point, CJ, for LSU to keep their head above water because their defense was terrible. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's like, Andre Ware, Ty Detmer back when, run and shoot quarterbacks like, oh my gosh, this guy threw for 5,000 yards. Let's just give him the Heisman. Those days are gone. But yeah, it's typically going to be the guy with the bigger numbers. And honestly, if there's a pool of dweebs that are right in line with, baseball Hall of Fame voters that vote for something that don't need to vote, Heisman Trophy voters are not that far up the ladder better than baseball Hall of Fame voters. And there's some Heisman voters, seriously, that do not need to vote. I'll never forget, this was the 2003 season. I'm listening to Jim Rome, and back when that, I don't know if that's still a thing or not, but I was listening to Jim Rome in the car, and Jim Lampley's filling in, and Jim Lampley had a Heisman vote. Jim Lampley, maybe the greatest boxing play-by-play announcer ever. Like Jim Lampley's highly respected. But Jim Lampley admits he has a Heisman vote, hadn't watched any college football all year, and wanted the listening audience to call in and tell him who he should vote for the Heisman. I'm like, is this not exhibit A of why your process sucks? And I don't know that it's gotten appreciably better over the years. So yeah, I can't trust it. But by the way, if Arch did have a great year, and I don't believe this, with all apologies to the Manning family, it wouldn't be the first time that the group of Heisman voters didn't give the Manning family probably what they should have deserved, even though I still will die on the hill. I will die on the hill. Charles Woodson deserved the Heisman in 1997. Peyton had a great year, but it was Woodson's. But again, I digress. Sean, thank you for the question. Texas Chick 01 saw Bobby and Jerry on freshman. What is the deal with the super freak Littleton? CJ, we call him that F word, gets thrown around quite liberally sometimes, but we ready to put that word freak on Grayson Littleton?
Yeah, I think he wasn't going to be one of those guys to make the freak list in this class, right? He probably just wasn't, right? When you consider a Justice Terry, a Lance Jackson, a Nick Brooks, all 6'7", 360 pounds of them, add Jonah Williams into that conversation. That's who really stole the headlines when Texas went through it signing day a year ago. And yet, again, I can't go a day without hearing something about practice and not hear Grayson Littleton's name. So I thought that was a really cool exercise by Jerry and Bobby to come up with kind of the 10 guys that they've heard the most about this year via that freshman class. And on a whim, look, I would probably have Grayson Littleton in that top 2 as well. And I think, all in all about this Texas secondary, it's going to be talented, it's going to be experienced. But if you're able to crack that rotation as a true freshman early, which Littleton's already done at that star position, at that outside cornerback position, yeah, he's a freak as a result of that. And I've talked about it too, Jeff. I don't know if you're a Mario Kart guy, but I keep going back to it. When you're riding around on Rainbow Road and you see that little boost, and for about 200 yards, you got that little extra speed boost. That's what he looks like when he gets in and out of breaks. It's pretty remarkable. And having seen that in practice a week ago kind of opened my eyes to how Texas could utilize that as just a straight up, man-to-man coverage guy that can go in any direction, and that's ultimately where that slot position is. So, yeah, I would absolutely now put him into that freak conversation, because seeing him in person, seeing the reports behind the scenes, he might be as good of he might have as high a ceiling at that cornerback spot as any Texas player they have on the roster at the moment.
Yeah, hopefully you're on Rainbow Road with Toad and not like Donkey Kong Jr. or Bowser, because it just ain't gonna work. Yeah, you got to cut the track. And yeah. Rainbow Road, Salty Q is right. Rainbow Road. My daughter CJ has found out in playing. I think we're on Mario Kart 8. Rainbow Road is not to be trifled with. Texas Chick 01, thank you for the question. Retired working man, is it true that Baxter is 90% right? If it's true that Baxter is 90% right now, he will definitely see more play before SEC play. We talked a lot about CJ Baxter, retired working man, and thank you for the question. I don't want him to get a role of any significance until he's 100%. Like I can't, especially we've seen what happened with Jonathan Brooks in Carolina last year, and I know, all knee injuries are different and circumstances are different, but I don't want CJ Baxter to suffer a setback. I want him 100% full board, ready to go. And I mean, to me, I'm glad you got the 3 non-con games where maybe you can ease him in a little bit, knowing that, all right, when you get to that Florida game, hopefully by then he can give you something. And then I think as the season goes on, just get him ramped up, and hopefully you got a nice 1-2 punch with he and Trey Wisner. But I'm not that I needed convincing CJ, but I think you and Bobby have solidified that on the Christian Clark train. I'm just going to keep my ticket on there. I'm not going to sell it or give it away. I'm going to keep my ticket on the Christian Clark train and probably be pretty happy at the end of the day. Retired working man, thank you for the question. Kenneth Cassidy asks, not including Baxter, who do you guys see as the starting 2 running backs in game 1? Again, I think if we're taking CJ Baxter out of the mix, I think it's going to be Trey Wisner and Christian Clark.
Yeah, I agree. And going back to Baxter, I think it'd be a little disingenuous to put a percentage onto what he is currently, right? I think You know, on a day-to-day, he might be 85%, he might be 75%, he might be 95%. You know, we just don't know at the moment. Look, and it's different, right? Texas hasn't taken to the ground in any of these practices. How does he react to getting hit in the knee? How does he react, having to get back up after running in between the tackles time and time again? We'll have to wait and see. But Christian Clark, Trey Wisner, there's your 1-2 punch for me at the moment. We'll see what a Jarrett Gibson can do. We'll see what a James Simon can provide to this offense as well. But ultimately, you got two really talented backs that can do a lot in the pass game and in the run game. They fit what Texas likes to do as well. So it's going to be interesting. And again, we'll go ahead and dive right onto this question here, Jeff, from Scott. How many running backs will Texas play when they're fully healthy? Look, a year ago, they only played about 2, right? They liked having a third, but ultimately, until you have that true trust of that Texas staff, they went back to who they knew they could rely on. And even then, Jaden Blue fell out of favor. So that group of that circle of trust at running back can get as big as 4. It could stay as low as 2. Even at times, stay as low as 1. But I think Texas, when middle of the season, will be Wisner. I think Baxter will be in there. I think Clark will be in there. And based off of what we expect from Jarrett Gibson, I think it's going to be hard to keep him off the field in some of those tight situations as well. So ultimately 4, if everybody's healthy, if everybody's contributing, that's really where I see that conversation holding on to.
We all do this. I do this. So I'm not, standing on the mountaintop being holier than thou, and again, I'm guilty of it too. I think sometimes we need to be careful when we look back at a previous season and just look at the numbers and the body of work and say, wow, fill in the blank player had a great year. You got to remember, especially in the case of the 2 backs we're talking about, right? In the case of Trey Wisner and especially Jaden Blue, the trajectory for both those guys, CJ, was not linear, right? It seemed like Trey Wisner was making the climb, and then I think he got banged up against Vanderbilt late, and then the Florida game, he only got 4 carries, and that was more like a Jaden Blue kind of day. So Jarrett Gibson got a lot of run against Florida. So and then, like you said, with Blue kind of just was off on the side, had fumble problems, wasn't really getting a lot of run, and then ends up maybe being your most productive offensive player in the college, other than Matthew Golden in the college football playoff. I think it was those 2. It was Blue and Golden, pretty much, that were your primary playmakers in the CFP run.
It was pretty interesting because it felt like Texas wanted to keep Blue sidelined, right? Just out of sheer, I don't know if they trusted him. And every time he was on the field, it was the 70-yard touchdown against Clemson. It was that incredible catch against Texas A&M. He had 2 touchdowns against Ohio State in the passing game, but he only had about 3 rushing attempts against Arizona State. He wasn't a big factor running the ball against Texas A&M, but you spin that wheel and you get a boom or bust play. That's really where I don't know if the Texas staff falls into that favor, right?
Right.
And Sark's talked about that consistency. Find the consistency and we'll build play to play. The boom or bust, I don't know if that's something that they truly enjoy, if that makes sense.
All right, let's thank another sponsor, and then we'll get right back to it. Vaughn Lane, are you tired of the hassle of flying or driving all over Texas? In my days covering recruiting, I was all over the state. I would have loved Vaughn Lane. Driving yourself on I-35, I-45, I-10, it is stressful. Airports, you got long lines, security stress, cramped seats. Just getting to your destination feels exhausting. So the next time you need to travel between Austin, Dallas, Houston, Fort Worth, or San Antonio, skip the stress and ride Vaughn Lane. It's your private jet on wheels. Just arrive minutes before your departure at one of Vaughn Lane's centrally located luxurious hotel partners. Just settle into your spacious reclining seat with tons of leg room and personal space. Enjoy complimentary snacks, drinks, Wi-Fi, even meals on select departures, all while you sit back and relax. Experience travel the way it should be. Visit vaughnlane.com and use the promo code OTF25. That's OTF25 for $20 off your first trip. Vaughn Lane, first class travel without the hassle. And definitely thanks to Vaughn Lane for being a sponsor here at On Texas Football. I got a super chat coming in. This is from Justin. CJ, I don't know if you want to go first. You want to let me go first. What's the worst practice y'all have seen at Texas, and what was the best? Great job as always, fellas.
Oh, I know you've been to more practices than I have, Jeff, and I'm sure over the last regime there were some pretty bad ones.
Bro, I was at some of those Charlie Strong practices where It's funny, we think about like everybody's like, oh, you guys are looking at through orange tinted glasses going into the season, whatever. Like, no, Texas is number one in the coaches poll. They might be number one when the AP poll comes out next week. I've seen bad Texas rosters, so I feel like I know what a good one looks like. I think the worst practice, you remember the worst ones more than you do the best ones. There were some of those Charlie Strong practices where I remember that 2015 season. I went and told a lunch group in Houston. They go, what do you think? Everybody's fired up. I was like, dude, I don't think this team's making a bowl game. Like, what? How can you say that? I was like, I seen what they got at quarterback. I've seen this defense. It's talented, but it's extremely young. Like, yeah, I don't think they were starting 2 true freshmen on the offensive line, and they weren't. It's not like they started Connor Williams and Patrick Vahe because they were like so great, and both those guys had really good careers. Connor Williams was drafted in the second round and played in the NFL for a while. Those guys started because there was nobody else. Like literally, they couldn't find anybody else to put on that offensive line. But the worst practice I've seen, Tom Herman's first spring. They were in stretch, and they were doing like, I don't know if you ever went to a Tom Herman practice, CJ, but there was a point of stretch where they would do like these 10-yard sprints during stretch, and guys weren't touching the line on the sprints, so it started to hold drill over. Normally they give you like a media viewing windows like right around a half hour. They ended up giving us more because they spent a half hour until everybody got like the stretch line procedure correct. So Tom was trying to change the culture at the time. There was it was a whole big to do with, but yeah, I think that was probably the worst.
My worst practice, and I only went to a handful of those Herman practices, right? I wasn't, all that involved while I was in school. So, but the worst practice I remember actually led into, remember 2021, I believe. You got the open to the public practice at DKR. I think it was the only year that Sark did that.
Yeah.
Right before then, he had a media viewing session in which, all of us media were able to walk out there, go see the team, first look really. And I remember sitting there watching routes on air, and I swear the passes, like if you were keeping a completion percentage account on routes on air, it might have been around 40%. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we have a quarterback battle. I know that for sure. But are we sure either of these quarterbacks are going to be in a position to win this game, like to win the battle amongst themselves? And on top of that, are we sure that this wide receiver group is going to be in a position to catch the football when necessary? So I remember leaving that practice. I made a phone call to a buddy in the industry, and I was just saying, I think I'm going to be taking every single under in this Texas season because I don't think that they can throw the football, and I don't think they'll be able to catch the football. But I did think that there was enough talent on the defense. Evidently, Texas goes 5-7. It was an ugly year all the way around. But yeah, watching routes on air when Quinn Ewers was throwing, with Arch Manning throwing, even Trey Owens a year ago, you're looking at, okay, they're up to about 90%. That's what a college routes on air, throwing portion should look like. But boy, it got ugly for a few of those practices, Jeff, and what a way it's come.
I can tell you the best practice I've ever been to. Maybe it was just because I was just young and impressionable. I think I'm trying to remember. I hadn't turned 21 yet. It was the year I turned 21. It was 2004, and I went to a preseason practice where that was when the media, you still got to watch the whole practice,
right?
And I remember watching that team and just being like, you were watching like Cedric Benson, Derek Johnson, and a young Vince Young, Michael Griffin, Cedric Griffin, Michael Huff, just watching those guys like before it really took off for that group. That was special. That was really special. So I think that practice I went to in 2004, and like if you ask, I don't know if Matt keeps like his practice notes. If Matt has practice notes from his little piece of like little third of an index card that he used to write on with the pen, like he might have said it was a bad practice, but I just remember just being in awe of the talent on the field that day.
Hey, it's starting to look like that now. Get these freaks out on the field.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure those practices are probably a little bit more fun than what I was first introduced to when Texas was just hoping to go to a bowl game.
Man, like I said, the 2015 was bad, and then even Charlie's first spring, where you'd known some of the losses, like Jeff Coat and those guys, Adrian Phillips, Trey Hopkins, all those guys were gone. We didn't know what was going to become of David Ash at that point. I was like, man, this is not a ton of talent on that team. This didn't have the bodies, and man, that freshman group, that 2014 freshman group. There's some dudes that gave really good efforts to Texas, but man, on the first practice of that 2014 group, I can't even say I saw it from Deontay Foreman because Deontay wasn't there because he had academic issues and didn't get to camp till like 2 weeks in. And I remember like the first practice where, because you got to go through like the acclimation period. We got to have like your shells practice, whatever. It may have even been a shells practice. He hadn't been there but maybe a week. And I remember Casey Studdard telling me, he goes, yeah, he was 33. And I was like, oh, it's Deontay Foreman, the freshman, just got there. Casey's like, yeah, he's the best running back on the team. I'm like, he just got there. And Casey's like, no, trust me, he's the best running back on the team. All right, well, Casey wasn't wrong. No. He knew what he was talking about. We got another super chat coming in. Thank you so much. Sugarcane Daddy, not the crop. When Strong came in and cleared out parts of the roster, how was that received behind the scenes? Was it a mistake? I'm trying to put myself back in, early to mid 2014, which is a dangerous thing if we're being honest, because I'll try to block a lot of that out. I don't know that it was more depressing than anything, Sugarcane Daddy, because I think it was just the realization of like, all right, it was the realization that the culture under Mac at the very end had eroded to a point where Charlie really had no choice but to, quite frankly, just tear it down to the studs. Just some of the stuff Sark's talked about. I know Tom, when he took the job, he talked about it, and Charlie talked about it too. A lot of entitlement, a lot of negativity, just not a lot of camaraderie. Just, and when you went through what that team went through in the late years under Mac, it's something that I learned. CJ taught me a lesson that a lot of coaches, when you're in win now mode, to get the players that you need to get, you end up cutting a lot of corners that you otherwise wouldn't cut. And in cutting those corners, you end up with some guys with, I'm not going to say questionable character, but guys that if you were doing your homework normally and done the background check properly and thoroughly, you probably wouldn't have taken them. And Mac ended up with more than a few of those guys. And quite frankly, some of those guys were guys that Charlie and David Rawls mentioned Strong drug tested the team and got rid of guys after. Charlie used to say this, and I agreed with him. Some of those guys got themselves dismissed, quite frankly. So I think it was just the realization, again, Sugarcane Daddy, that like, wow, this is the rot within this program is way worse than any of us thought.
It's interesting because I remember the whole thing. You have guys that you're expecting to have, big time contributions to the roster are dismissed, and you're sitting there saying, all right, well, what's this team going to be? Are they going to have enough top end talent? But going back to your point, when you're trying to win now, you do cut corners. I think Sark cut corners in 2021, having arrived and seeing 8 offensive linemen, 20 wide receivers, and you're sitting there saying, well, none of them can catch a football still. What's he do? He goes to the portal and he gets some guys that he recruited at Alabama. Maybe not the best character guys, or evidently neither of them were able to, sustain a long tenure in Austin. But you have to, especially at a school like Texas, where if you stack multiple 5 and 7 seasons, much like a Charlie Strong or a Tom Herman, you're not going to have a long leash to build the program you want. It is just unfortunate, again, that some of these kids, their careers just don't pan out the way that you expect, but that's what you got to do as a coach. And, Texas fortunately in a position now where they don't have to do that. Yeah.
And that's, Jeff Traylor said this publicly, and for the record, he's also told this to me, kind of when he got to Texas. I think Coach Traylor was there 15 and 16. They knew they were in trouble. Like, especially that 2015 season that season took a couple of years off my life. Whenever I leave this earth, my wife can blame it on the 2015 Texas football season as why I didn't get a little bit longer. But anyway, Coach Traylor mentioned that Charlie, for better or for worse, he's like, look, we're going to do this the right way. Like, we're going to build this roster. Like, we're going to make the best evaluations we can. We're going to try to get, character guys in here. And it just, I think they knew, like, yeah, if we do that this way, it's noble, but man, I don't know if we're going to have enough time to get this thing turned around. And at the end of the day, they just didn't have enough time because, Deontay Foreman's 51 carry game against Kansas ended up with a fumble. And yeah, so it's, it was what it was. But yeah, it's, Charlie didn't cut corners. And, I think that's why Tom was able to get it turned around from 5-7 to at least going to a bowl game and winning a bowl game. And then year 2, you play for a Big 12 championship. I think that's due to some of the guys he inherited from Charlie, which you look at, some of those guys are still cashing checks in the NFL. CJ, it paid off. I want to thank, we've got a super chat to get to, but I want to thank our last sponsor of the night. That is our friends at South Point Dodge. Texas football fans score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point at South Point Dodge. South Point Dodge has over 600 vehicles in stock, and their award-winning sales staff doesn't do games or gimmicks. They just get straight to the point by getting you the best deal. So score big today at South Point Dodge. Come see us off I-35 in South Austin or at southpointdodge.com. Get to the point at South Point Dodge. And thanks South Point Dodge for their sponsorship of On Texas Football. Mike Thompson with the super chat. Thank you so much. Said, I know this is off topic, but what is the reason Roschon never stayed at quarterback? His senior tape when he was playing quarterback was elite. Similar, the 2019 Texas team, very similar to the 2024 Texas team. They ran out of running backs.
Yes.
And they needed to move somebody there. And Roschon volunteered and ended up becoming an NFL player at running back. The fact that he ended up in the league because of his athleticism and his work ethic, and we all know Roschon with the intangibles is off the chart. I don't think that's surprising. I would have loved to have seen in that Tom Herman offense, CJ, that kind of old school, kind of Urban Meyer pro spread offense. I'd have loved to have seen what it looked like with him at quarterback. But if between attrition and, because remember, if you go from 18 to 19, they had lost. Trey Watson was only there for 1 year. Kirk Johnson, I think in the spring maybe, had gotten injured, or maybe in camp had gotten injured by that point. Jordan Whittington, who because of depth, they actually started like Jay Witt's first spring. He was at running back.
Yep.
He ended up getting hurt, and he had a lingering sports hernia deal from late in his career at Cuero that he got it fixed, but it didn't quite get fixed right. So that was a whole deal that he had to deal with early in his career. But Jay Witt was on the shelf. You had a deal where Keontae Ingram had gotten hurt at one point, and they just needed basically, they just needed bodies to get through camp, like just to scrimmage. And CJ, I'm sorry, I apologize if I stole your thunder there, but yeah, basically we never saw him at quarterback because they needed him at running back. Otherwise, you'd have had, I think you were down to I remember Mason Ramirez was a walk-on from Round Rock who was at safety. They actually had to move him back to running back because I'm not talking like scholarship bodies. They had no bodies.
They had nobody. Yeah, that's what I remember the most about, being excited to go into, I believe, my junior year and just sitting there. It's like, we got a team this year. And it's like, oh, wait, we don't have one of the more important positions on the entire field. There's just nobody there. But I was going through that roster, as you said. Jordan Whittington, freshman running back. Darian Brown, unfortunately, never played a snap at Texas due to a crazy unforeseen, health scare. Kirk Johnson, as you mentioned, always injured. And that was the guy, my first practice that I remember going to, seeing him run routes. And I think one of my first photos I ever tweeted from a Texas football practice was actually Kirk Johnson receiving handoffs from Roschon Johnson. And I remember sitting there, I was like, wow, this Kirk Johnson guy looks like a damn NFL guy. He looks physically as impressive as, and I'll forever stand by that, 6 foot, 220 pounds. He looked like an NFL running back. Issue is he's never truly healthy. And you go down the list, Daniel Young, I think was one of the few guys that stayed even remotely healthy, but didn't contribute a whole lot. And then
I was a Daniel Young stan, CJ. I'm not going to lie. I love Daniel Young, what he did in 2017. And, I think the last we saw Danny Young was maybe in that 18 season Man, it was one of the worst calls Tom Herman / Tim Beck had. It was a 2018 season. It was a game they won at home against TCU, and they had like a 4th and 2, like right around midfield, and they ran a toss to Daniel Young into the boundary, and it got nowhere. I'm like, I understand the element of surprise, but there's a reason why toss to Daniel Young into the boundary is one of the last things I'd expect you to run there.
This whole rabbit hole, I know this whole show, Matthew, you could basically just talk it, title it talking running backs on a Wednesday night.
Yeah.
That's all we've done today. But that running back class of Daniel Young and I believe it was Tennille Carter. Oh my goodness. Man, I was excited for both. Flipping a Georgia running back late in the cycle. Let's see what Carter can do when he gets to campus. Obviously, it didn't pan out, but that was about the time where I was really getting into recruiting, really getting into what the next year of football will look like outside of just flipping the calendar to August. That was a really unfortunate one in which it just didn't pan out for the Longhorns.
It's interesting, CJ. Say what you want about the Tom Herman staff. They could evaluate talent because that 2017 class, some of the guys they brought with them from Houston, Daniel Young was one of the guys that was committed to them at Houston. So was Marquez Bimage, who played a little bit at Texas. But the two big ones that were Houston commits that came with the staff were Derek Kerstetter and Sam Cosme.
Yep.
So
it's pretty impressive stuff there.
Yeah, that's that. And that's honestly, that's why they got a heads up with the 2018 class. Because you go back and look at that signing class, between BJ Foster and Jalen Green, Anthony Cook, Deshaun Jameson, the headliners in that class for the most part, with the exceptions of a few, Brendan Eagles, Avante Woodard, most of those guys were Houston guys. And I remember the chatter was, man, if Herman would have stayed at Houston, they would have had like maybe the all-time, in terms of recruiting rankings, maybe the all-time group of 5 class, because they were about to raid Greater Houston. But it ended up working out for Texas with some of those guys. But we're going deep down a rabbit hole on this one. Thanks everybody. Thank you everybody for the questions. CJ, let's blow through these. Colin Hiles and Bobby Petronic both asked kind of similar question. Bobby Petronic asks, is Cruz a better option than Robertson at this point? And Colin Hiles asks, any updates on Daniel Cruz? CJ, I think right now, and I kind of hinted at this in my piece over on TexasFootball.com about the offensive line. I think right now, Connor Robertson's the better option. You may get to a point this season where I don't know if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, and we'll see how the season continues to progress. But right now, Connor Robertson is still running with that second team unit. I think, again, and we've heard Jerry talk about it since the season ended a year ago. Texas really likes what they have in Daniel Cruz. But you got to, kind of bide your time, wait your turn essentially. And right now in camp, one of those big battles is that backup center position. Daniel Cruz, Connor Robertson, he's coming along. He's looking just as strong as ever, right? It's 6'3.5", Jeff, probably around 315 pounds or so.
Yeah.
But right now he's still duking it out with Connor Robertson for that backup center spot.
Yeah. Stout is how I describe Daniel Cruz. Again, Colin and Bobby, thank you both for the questions. We'll blow through a couple of these again as we wind down here. Daniel Earp asks, because of early returns, do we think Emmett Mosley has a Matthew Golden type of season? I think that's too much to put on him. I think Ryan Wingo being wide receiver 1, DeAndre Moore is going to get his. So a Matthew Golden type season. And we talked about this last night too, CJ, on the stream. I think it's unfair to expect Emmett Mosley to do what A.D. Mitchell and Matthew Golden did because those guys were true juniors when they got to Texas. Emmett Mosley just a sophomore coming off the 1 year in Stanford. They were more proven commodities at that point than Emmett Mosley was. I think you got to remember too, A.D. Mitchell had national championship game experience at that point from his time with Georgia. And Matthew Golden, rough sophomore year at Houston. He was banged up. Donovan Smith wasn't a very good quarterback, as a lot of people ended up finding out. But, man, you go back to his freshman year when you paired him with Tank Dell, and he wasn't asked to be the number 1 and Houston had a wide receiver group with Tank Dell and Matthew Golden at one point. That's wild to think about. And Clayton Tune, not an elite quarterback, I think Clayton Tune, a very competent quarterback. Matthew Golden was productive and put up numbers. So Matthew Golden showed he could play and played at a really high level. And like I said, AD Mitchell had, basically for those guys, Texas was the last stop to get some polish before going to the league. I think for Emmett Mosley, it's more about going to be multiple years of development.
The craziest part about that Houston team, those rosters, is for 2 straight years we heard kind of those NFL draft guys talk about the sleeper of the draft would be a Clayton Tune, would be a Donovan Smith. And it's like, no, it's not. They just got 2 freaks at wide receiver, plus Manjack, who I think Texas fans remember had quite a game for Houston against Texas in Houston.
Yeah.
They had some really talented kids playing, or I guess running routes for them. And it totally boosted what was the ultimate play of those quarterbacks into being, quote, sleepers of the upcoming NFL draft. And, we come to find out that just wasn't the case at all.
The Donovan Smith hype was I didn't really see it when he was at Tech, even though he got a win over Texas. He was the winning quarterback when Texas went up to Lubbock in 22 and won. Never really saw like top of the first round type guy with Donovan Smith. And that fizzled out pretty quick. So yeah, it's my frustration with it's less about like this time of year. CJ annoys me to no end, especially as a Cowboys fan, because I knew the Joe Milton scrimmage videos were coming.
Oh yeah,
I knew it, and they're out, and there's a decent chunk of Cowboys Nation that's now convinced themselves Joe Milton needs to be playing instead of Dak. I'm like, there's a lot more to playing quarterback than chucking the ball 70 yards down the field. Like, that's a really nice party trick. It doesn't win you games in the NFL. So, I don't know, just a little Cowboys rant for me right there. Let's finish this up, CJ. Astro is silly. Should we be concerned about Sark's uneasiness about the offense? CJ, I don't think it's uneasiness as much as it's just him telling the offense, like, look, step back, take a deep breath, and relax a little bit. Stop pressing. You're not going to be perfect. It's okay to strive for perfection, but just need to learn how to move on to the next play. So I don't think he's uneasy about it, Astro. I think it's more of, I think he put it probably the best way. He said it's just some mental toughness things that the offense is not a personnel thing or really an execution thing. It's kind of that old Nick Saban process type thing.
Yeah, I agree. And again, this is the part of the year in which you want to be tested. You get your strengths, your weaknesses ironed out now, right? Texas doing that just by Jeff. The term I love that you use often is baptism by fire. In Texas offense, got all of its new pieces in place. They're getting tested immediately by this Texas defense, which could just be the best in the country, right? We've talked about that. So no, it's all about consistency. It's all about being on the same page. That's why Texas, in my opinion, is huddling up a little bit more, and it's why they're going under center a little bit more, making sure that Arch's voice is heard at every level of that Texas offense. Because look, you're going to need that camaraderie and really that continuity across the offense when you walk into the Horseshoe on August 30th.
I know it's you talk about adjusting to the speed of the game, and in Columbus against Ohio State, it's going to be moving fast. I think for the offense, the speed of the game is not going to shock them because they'll have seen that in scrimmage situations going against their own defense. Like, no, these guys, our guys are just as fast, if not faster, or just as athletic, if not more athletic, or just as big, if not bigger, than Ohio State's guys. That's the benefit of having a really stacked, talented roster. So, Astro, bottom line, no, I wouldn't be concerned. Maybe just earmark it a little bit and track progress, but I wouldn't be concerned about it right now. Cisco Diaz asks, which third-year guy, CJ, makes the biggest jump? It would be easy to say, like, how much more of a jump can Anthony Hill make?
Yeah.
The more I hear about him, not going to predict Thorpe Award or anything like that, but I think this is the year where everybody gets reminded that Manny Muhammad's a really good football player.
Yeah. I was going to go Derek Williams, and just returning from injury. I think those are 2 really big questions. You could pick a third in that one too. Jelani McDonald. That was a really good defensive back haul in that. 23.
Yeah, I know. I think Todd Lacey mentioned Neto. I think a couple people mentioned Neto. Neto's a really good candidate for that. He just needs reps. Like, we just haven't seen him. David Ross says Colton Vasek.
It's good pick.
Just needs to stay healthy.
Yep.
You know, so it's hard. It's going to be hard to argue, and it's going to which is the best class of these run of really elite classes. It's going to be really fun 5, 6, 7 years down the road to look back at these signing classes and be like, all right, how many, top 3 round draft picks did you have? How many, Pro Bowlers did this class produce? Because there's going to be some of that with this class. I have no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
CJ will finish off the night. Speaking of Todd Lacey, Todd has a question. On another note, did anyone else see the pictures of the upgraded football locker room? Got recliners in that mug now.
They got the Von Lane chairs sitting in those locker rooms. But yeah, I saw a few comments, Jeff. When do we revert back to the old wooden looks of a locker room? When do we revert back to kind of those retro old school locker rooms instead of the flashiness where everything looks like a stainless steel refrigerator? I like the way it looks now, but does anyone ever become the first to go backwards?
If you like a locker room free of staff, then no, I don't think you're ever going back.
Fair.
Man, back in high school, man, it wasn't 2-a-days until somebody inevitably asked the question, like, man, hey, does this look right? I got something on my back here. Like, bro, I think you got some staff. I think you got a little staff.
A little fungus.
Yeah. The stainless is easier to clean. You got everything's vented. You can hang your pads up and let them dry. CJ, long gone are the days of just in high school putting your jocks and socks and shirts on a hook and getting them in the washing machine. And when you get them back the next day for practice, maybe your stuff didn't get through the dryer all the way, so maybe it's still wet. So you're putting on moldy clothes. Yeah, football has come a long way since then, and I don't think you're going back.
Yeah, you're probably right. And hey, it looks good. Recruits like it. The kids like it. You saw their reactions today on social media. It's going to play for a while.
All right. That's going to do it for the Wednesday night mess around, CJ. Thank you so much. Matthew, thank you behind the scenes. The MVP of On Texas Football is Matthew, producing it and making it happen each and every day here at OTF. If you're not a subscriber to OnTexasFootball.com, I keep talking about the website. CJ and Blake have dropped practice nuggets over there. Bobby and Jerry have plenty of stuff. I had a story today about the offensive line. CJ, I think, what do you have, CJ, about some of the stuff we talked about tonight, actually, with the defense being ahead of the offense? All that and much more over at OnTexasFootball.com. If you're not a member, use the promo code OTFOG. That's OTFOG. Use that when you sign up. You'll get 1 year of access for $39.95. Now's the time. If you're not hooked up with OnTexasFootball.com, I don't know what you're waiting for. You need to get over there. Also, make sure you like this video. Subscribe to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you're staying abreast of everything going on the 40 acres. I think, tentatively, I don't like to do teases. Again, Rod said it's that radio PTSD. We might be going live tomorrow around lunchtime after the player availability. I think we'll have to see how everything works out. I think tentatively that is the plan. So, again, thank you, everybody, for your questions, especially those of you that dropped super chats. Thank you so much for your ongoing support of what we're doing here at On Texas Football. For CJ, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the Wednesday night live stream. If you got questions that we didn't answer, Coffee and Football first thing tomorrow morning. We know Blake will be muted. Jerry will have his loins girded, and Bobby will be holding down the fort. So make sure you get to the guys at Coffee and Football. And tomorrow afternoon, Rod will be back with CJ and Coach Shipley on the Winning Drive. So make sure you tune in for that. For everybody on Texas Football, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Welcome.